Hello, I'm Peter Bernard from the Scary Stories NYC channel here on YouTube. In case you missed our debut episode, Professor Panic is a nickname used by an elderly gentleman who claims he worked for years developing and reverse engineering impossible technology, or tech which was able to simulate what seemed impossible. His close lifelong friend was a field agent for the same company, who we will call Herman Bruland in these stories. Bruland's job was to travel the country, and even beyond, searching for true stories of apparently impossible occurrences. He would confiscate evidence and kill media coverage of these events, bringing everything he found back to the professor's department to determine if the tech involved was their own, a rival company's, or the result of something truly unknown to science. The professor would like me to mention before beginning that, quote, "The following has been rewritten from the notes of field agent Herman Bruland, supplemented with my own memories of Herman telling me about this in person," unquote. This episode I will read Coyote Packs in the New York City Sewers by Professor Panic, read by Peter Bernard. In early 1973, a rumor went around the East New York section of Brooklyn that a monster was haunting Flatlands Avenue near the new water treatment plant that had just opened recently. Bruland followed a few leads until he located and interviewed two teenage boys whose names we'll withhold for this story. Both boys testified that they were out after curfew on the corner of Bell Street and Flatlands Avenue, smoking something they shouldn't have been smoking. They both told the same story, even when questioned separately. At first they heard odd sounds, as though something large were moving around on the other side of the fence separating East New York with swamps and nature. Then there was a crash of branches, leaves, and metal as a large gray creature leaped to the top of the fence. It looked all around itself, then spied them, and began growling. Both boys described the creature as seeming at first about the size of a large adult man. Its body appeared like a man's, but covered in hair like a monkey. The older boy claimed the creature had dog-like hind legs. The younger boy never mentioned the legs or feet, but he claimed it had dog-like ears that stood up on the top of its head. Both boys described the long, fang-like teeth and the drool that spilled out of its mouth as it growled at them. Apparently the boys made its mouth water. The younger boy says they ran home at this point, but the older boy says he threw rocks at the monster to scare it back down onto its side of the fence. This angered the beast, who jumped down onto the paved surface, just a few feet away from the boys. When it stood up to its full height, they could see it was far taller than an average man. At that point, both boys are in agreement that they ran home. They only lived 2 blocks west. The trouble was, that was the direction the Dogman was blocking. Consequently, both ran south down Bell Street, a much longer block than either of the two would have preferred running down. The two were winded by the time they reached the corner of Coyote Avenue and turned left. The older boy said he saw the creature leap a tall hedge, and he knew it would be waiting for them behind their homes if they tried to get in the back way. He thought they might be a little safer on the streets under the lights, although either way, they were easy prey for the Dogman, who suddenly howled loudly from some place they couldn't see. This caused a commotion of shouting, and both boys claimed they heard either a gunshot or a BB gunshot at least, followed by more screaming. Both agree that they never stopped running home, and both say they now give the edge of the neighborhood by the swamps as wide a berth as possible. Although there are only a few buildings that could have been the location of the gun or BB gun shooting, Bruland could find nobody willing to admit knowing anything about the event. Now, the only reason Herman was even asking questions about this alleged occurrence was because of something that happened 11 days later inside the water treatment facility's tunnels leading into and out of the city's sewer system. 2 men investigating a blockage in a tunnel told Bruland they came across parts of the remains of human bodies of some of their fellow workers. They immediately retreated and told their supervisors what they had seen. Incredibly, they were sent right back in, backed up by 2 armed security personnel. Here is where the stories of the 2 men begin diverging. Let us refer to them as Mr. A and Mr. B. They were both accompanied by a 3rd man, whom we shall refer to as Mr. C. Mr. A radioed back to command when they had reached the location of the body parts, immediately outside the entrance to a tunnel about large enough for a man to crawl through. Over the walkie-talkie, their boss told him to proceed into the tunnel. He hesitated, then radioed back asking if the 2 armed men could go in before the 3 unarmed men. Mr. B told Bruland that while Mr. A was arguing over the walkie-talkie, Mr. C had become very interested in something he apparently saw or heard in a different tunnel further down the passage. Mr. B claimed he watched as something he called a, quote, giant rat, unquote, lunged quickly out of the tunnel and began to drag Mr. C in with it. Mr. A also claimed to have witnessed the incident, but in his version, it was the head of a dog he saw emerge from the hole in the wall, not the head of a rat. Even before radioing in what was happening, all 4 remaining men began running back the way they came in, not really caring anymore what their bosses wanted them to do. There, both Mr. A and Mr. B claimed that they and the 2 security guards were confronted with a pack of 7 or 8 coyotes, or light-colored large feral dogs. Both agree that the largest of these dogs took up the rear and that he was so much taller than the others that his chest came above the hindquarters of the rest of them. Now, good doggies, Mr. A says one of the security guards started saying, trying to soothe the beasts. Instead, they all began growling and adopting aggressive postures. They widened their stances, put their heads lower to the ground, bared their teeth, and glared through angry eyes. One of the dogs lunged forward and both security guards opened fire. At this point, Mr. A claims that the largest dog in the rear stood up on its hind legs and began walking toward them, emitting a terrifying howl while twitching nightmarishly. He said it was like a werewolf, but not a Lon Chaney type of werewolf. Mr. B tells the story differently. He told Bruland that the tall dog stood on its hind legs briefly for whatever reason, but that immediately both security guards opened fire on it, and the twitching and quote-unquote walking that Mr. A claims to have witnessed were probably the dog reacting to being shot multiple times while balancing on its hind legs. Both men agree that there were 2 or 3 dogs that made it through the gunfire and were now attacking the security guards, and that is the moment the 2 of them managed to run the rest of the way out of the tunnels and back to safety. Both security and Mr. C were never recovered. Bruland informed both men solemnly that they had best not repeat the story anymore for reasons of national security, and to please pass this warning on to any friends or family they may have told already. He told me that he didn't really care if they did though, as this didn't seem to really be related to the technology we produced or any technology whatsoever. Although there were aspects of the event in which the 2 men claimed to have seen different things, that could easily be explained away. If one expects to see a rat head emerge from a tunnel, but a dog's head comes out instead, it might be natural for the mind, in the split second you see the creature, to interpret it as the head of a giant rat. The swampy area around the pollution treatment plant had been a spot where a lot of illegal dumping of hazardous materials had been taking place for generations. Lord only knows what other kinds of monsters had been breeding out there, right on the edge of the largest city in the world. This water pollution treatment facility was going to make that part of the world safe for natural things again. It was only natural for the unnatural to fight back. Bruland theorized that the creatures were probably already being exterminated by the city, and most likely this would be the last we'd ever hear of the Brooklyn Flatlands monster, or the Dogman of Brooklyn. If you like this story and want to hear more, please let us know by clicking like and subscribing. We really appreciate every new subscriber and every like or comment. We'll be back with a new story later in this week, And don't forget to check out the Scary Stories NYC channel as well. PQ River has a couple of new Bigfoot stories coming out this week. I don't know if they're out yet or coming out tomorrow or whatever, but any day now. And Madeline Starr is in the process of recording a whole pile of new stories right now. So there's lots to come from both this channel and that channel, and expect a surprise guest appearance on this channel from one or both of the stars of that one. It's coming soon. Until then, always remember, the impossible is very, very possible.